Hello guys, welcome back to class. In this session, we will see about data types and variables. Data types and variables. These are two different but interrelated. So learning at one place. So whenever you write a program contains set of instructions, set of statements or set of instructions, right? If you write a program, your program contains set of instructions, set of statements. What is the goal of a program, guys? In general, what a program does? What a program does? In general, what a program does? Program always takes the input, process that input, produces output. Correct? Any program you write. Small program will take a small input, small processing, small output. When you write a very big program, it takes maybe a lot of input, do a lot of processing, and it may produce a lot of output. But finally, taking the input, any program takes the input, number one, takes input, number two, process it, and number three, produce the output. This is all simply about a program. Program is program is set of instructions, set of statements, which takes the input, process it, and produces the output. Okay? Say I am taking a simple program which takes the two input values. It is taking two values input, 10, 20. Program job is to take a two input values, 10, 20. The process here is find the sum. Find the sum. And output is produce the output as 30. Produce output as 30. Very simple program. Takes the two values as input, find the sum of two numbers and produce the output, the sum as output. Very simple program. This is, you write the code, it will run, it will give the output. But we dig internally what is happening. So internally, when you are running this program, whether this program will utilize memory or not. Whether this program will utilize memory or not. Whether this program will utilize while running, whether this program will utilize memory or not. Yes, it has to utilize. Which memory? Primary or secondary? Which has to utilize the primary memory, right? Or we will call shortly as a main memory, right? Main memory. Always we will use the term main memory or RAM. Main memory. Use the term always main memory. I also will use in my sentences. So it will use the main memory only. Okay. Now, why it will use main memory here in this program? In this program, why it uses main memory? Can you tell that? Why this particular program, taking two numbers as input, finding the sum, producing output, why it will use the main memory? Why it needs in this currently? Why it need, guys? This is your RAM or main memory. First, you are giving input, not for accessing. Navanita, don't use miss volatile. Don't make it the terms. Don't make it generic. Make it simple. See, first you are giving 10 input. It has to store that somewhere, right? It has to store the value somewhere first, right? Take a simple, first simple, very simple. You are giving 10. Suppose I am telling a program, guys, you are not using any computer, you are using a pen and paper, you are using a book and paper. I am asking, boss, find the sum of two numbers. Okay, write down the numbers. First number 10. You will write that, okay, A equals to 10. Then I am telling second number 20. Then you will write in the book as, okay, B equals to 20. Then I'll ask you find the sum. Then you will do calculation. You will tell result as to me, right? So first when I am telling, take the first input 10. You are writing that. Again, I am telling second input, third input, if any. Like if I may give, I taken as a two inputs. Maybe in a real program, you may have a multiple inputs, right? So whatever inputs coming up first from user, I have to take it and store it somewhere in the memory temporarily, right? This is temporary only, right? So temporarily only this is, right? No permanent Vishnu Priya. This is all temporary. RAM is a temporary. So what happens is, whenever you run this program, first it has to allocate memory block. It allocates a memory block. Okay. And first value will be stored. Yeah, 10 is stored here. Next, you are giving second input. Again, it has to allocate another memory block, allocating one room, consider as one room allocated, in that keeping 10 value. Again, you are giving second input. Again, it is allocating another room here and keeping that value. Next, after finding that, you are saying A plus B or whatever, 10 plus 20. The result it has to store. To store the result, it is allocating another memory block and keeping the result 30. And 30 it will produce to you, it may print to you on the screen. So you will see the output, you are happy. The low level, high level, two things to see. Now low level guys, how many memory blocks allocated? 3 memory blocks allocated. Okay. In these 3 memory blocks, it is storing first input data, second input data, and the result of these two. First input data, second input data, and the result of these two. It is storing. Now, I have 2 questions on this. My question number 1 is, what is the size of memory block? What is size of memory block? How much it has to allocate? Memory block means you have to tell about one block only, each block. How can you say as 4, guys? You're telling as a 4. How can you say 4? How can you say 4? That is important to me. 3 bytes. How it is 3 bytes, Navya? Who told as int? I didn't say anywhere as int here. I didn't say anywhere in this as int. I did not say anywhere as int. I didn't say one byte also. Any clue? Do you have any clue in this? Think practically. Don't assume anything. Don't assume and answer anything. Whatever you're seeing on the screen, do you have any clarity? Any clarity is there? How much allocation is required? No clarity, right? Yesterday I told, but I didn't fix anything here, right? Currently, no clarity. That is when it is compiling. First, now this is, we didn't go to program level. We didn't go to any program level. Sandhya and Bhargav, we didn't go to program level. Currently, we didn't say anything about how much memory to allocate. So the point here is, we have to instruct that I want a memory space and allocate this much. So block size is the 1 point. Next, in these 3 blocks, which block is storing the first input, which block is storing the second input, which block is storing the third output? How can you recognize? My question is, which block is storing the first input? Or your three friends came from your three friends came to your native place, guys. You booked a room, you booked a hotel. For a friend one room is booked. Friend two, one room is booked. Friend three, one room is booked. So how can you identify which friend is staying where? You should have a room number. Room number or name is required, right? Room number or name is required. So second question is how to recognize which block stores input and which block stores output. So some identification mechanism is required, right? So two questions are unanswered. I am giving input. Now I'll come in such a way. You are confusing if I give a 10, 20 here. Now, see, generalize the thing. You generalize the thing. I will give two inputs. We have to store the two inputs. Find the sum, produce the output. Now, to store the input, you tell me how much space is required to allocate? How much space is required to allocate? You can tell the program, allocate 3 blocks of memory. Allocated 3 blocks. Yes, allocated 3 blocks. Fine. I will give 2 inputs. Program takes 2 inputs. I may give 10, 20, I don't know. I may give 1 lakh and 5 lakhs as input. Any 2 numbers coming up, the program has to add it, right? So some 2 numbers, how much memory you have to allocate for each block? And output will come. For output, how much? And these blocks we have to give a naming conventions. These two things will be addressed by 2 concepts called data types and variables. I mean, whenever you are trying to store data in the memory, first you recognize what type of data you are storing. You are storing a simple integers or a big integers. You are storing a floating point numbers or integer numbers. You are storing characters or strings, because user input is depending on user input can be anything. So what input is coming? That input can be a number. Input can be a number, means again it can be an integer number or a floating point number. Or integer number, whether you are dealing with a small integers or a big integers. Floating point, you are dealing with a small floating points or big floating points. Like this, depending on the data you are getting, you have to say, I may get this type of data, so please allocate this much of memory. 1. So you have to say that, please allocate this much of memory. Number 1. Next, after allocating the memory block, you have to name it. For example, now you take a simple only. Suppose I am taking input as 10 and 20 only, guys. So 10 I'll store in A. So that you store here 10, name the block as A. The block name is now A. Next you're getting 20, store here and make the block name as B. And I'll do C equals to A plus B. Do arithmetic operation. The result I am storing in a memory block called C. So what happened? And now how much? Suppose I am getting always smaller values, or I may get bigger values. I will say int only here. A of int type, B of int type, C of int type. So because I am telling integer, it has to allocate according to me integer 4 bytes, it has to allocate 4 bytes. It has to allocate 4 bytes. It has to allocate 4 bytes. So when I am writing the program, I am declaring a of integer type. What is a here? A is a variable I am declaring with the data type int. B is a variable I am declaring with the data type int. C is a variable I am declaring with the data type int. So how the variables and data types are linked? When you want to store any data, first you have to declare a variable. When you declare a variable, you must specify data type, because for this variable, it is going to allocate memory. Memory block will be allocated. Block name is the variable name. Block name is the variable name. How much size has to be allocated for block? You want only 1 byte enough, or 2 bytes you want, or 4 bytes you want, or 8 bytes you want? Depending on your input type, input size, you know what kind of values you're getting. For example, you are storing student marks, guys. You are storing student marks. Exam for 100 marks. 100 marks means what values you will get? You will get maximum 100 value, right? If everybody gets 100 out of 100, all the marks, maximum is 100 only. So what is your maximum value you are storing? 100 only. 100 means how much space you need? 1 byte enough. You declare as 1 byte only. You declare as 1 byte only. Or you are storing, for example, election related count, some count you are storing, how many votes came for a particular person. So votes means that maybe 1 lakh, 2 lakhs, 3 lakhs will come. So bigger number means we may need more space. Then you declare as integer only. Depending on your input usage, you declare that much space will be allocated, that much memory block will be allocated. The name of the block is your variable name, right? So data types and variables. Again, start. So two things required. Name of the block we need, size of the block we need. Name of the block we need, size of the block we need. How we will get a name of the block? Variable name is the name of the block. How we will get a size of the block? Data type has a default size for memory allocation. Now take the variables and data types again. So if you want to declare a variable, you need a data type. So what's the basic syntax to do here is, you specify the data type and variable name, semicolon. Or you can also say data type, variable name equals to value. On the spot you can assign a value. On the spot you can assign a value, or maybe you without value. This is one kind of syntax, without a value initialization, with another syntax with value initialization. For example, I will declare a simple variable here. I am saying int a semicolon. This is a Java statement or not? Is this Java statement, guys? Yes, because ending with a semicolon is Java statement. This is called as variable declaration statement. This is statement. What it is doing actually, this is declaring a variable. So you can also call this statement only special statement. What is the speciality? What it is doing actually? What is the task it is doing? In this, you are declaring a variable. So this is called as variable declaration statement. Okay. When this statement executes, internally what happens? In the memory, what happens? Internally, it allocates a memory block. One block will be allocated. When it is allocating memory block, it will see how much space to allocate. Because we give an int, 4 bytes will be allocated. And what is the name of this block? Name is variable name as a. And after allocating the block, whatever data inside that, it will clean it. There is no garbage values in Java. If you have a knowledge of C, C++, maybe when you allocate garbage value means in this space, previously some data stored, it will be there as it is. But in Java, what it does is, it will clean this. It is allocating 4 bytes of space for us. In this space, suppose something is stored previously. That is the garbage value. Java cleans that. JVM cleans that and initializes the value called 0 inside this. What is the default value of integer? 0. 0 will be assigned as default value. Or if I do like this, for example, I am saying into b equals to 25. So I am initializing the value. So again, you do this statement. Memory block has to be allocated. What is the size of memory block, guys? Again, 4 bytes because b is the integer. Okay, 4 bytes. What is the name of the block? Name of the block is b. Now, it will clean the memory in this block. Whatever data, if any, garbage data, if any, old data, if any, stored here, it will clean all this, make the empty, clean. Then in that, it will keep the value 25 because you are assigning a value 25, it keeps the 25. Is that clear? Now take another scenario. So another example I am taking. I am taking double this side. Double D1 semicolon. So another statement is double is another data type equals to 99.9. Double is for storing the floating point numbers. Okay. Now, when this statement executed, memory block has to be allocated. Okay, allocated. What is the size of the memory block? That is depending on the data type. What is the size of memory block? Depending on the data type. Integer 4 bytes, double 8 bytes. It takes 8 bytes of memory. 8 bytes of memory will be allocated. After allocating the memory for a block, name of the block is D1. Name of the block is D1. After that, it cleans the memory and assigns the default value. What is the default value to be initialized here? Again, the default value is depending on the data type. For the floating point numbers, the default is 0.0. 0.0. 0.0. Now, same again. Another variable. It is at how much space? 8 bytes because a double. What is the name of the block? D2. Because you are initializing a value that will be initialized here. Garbage values will not be there, Lakshmi. No garbage values. It cleans that. See, for example, this 8 bytes of memory now allocated. Okay. Now 8 bytes of memory allocated for D2. Okay. Consider this, guys. Now for a D2 variable, 8 bytes of memory allocated. What is the value in this? 99.99. So I declared D2 and I used it. My task over. So this program over. Again, I am running other program. When I am running other program, again in that program, I am declaring double D equals to 1.2. This is my other program using. For this D, it has to allocate 8 bytes of memory. Okay. When it is allocating 8 bytes, assume that it is allocating same block only. It is allocating same block only. Understand? It is allocating same block only. Now, in this block, 8 bytes allocated, its name now giving as a D. But in this, the old value is there, right? 99.99 is the old value. The previous program has stored the value 99.99, right? This is called as the garbage value, old value. Understand what is the garbage value? This 99.9 is the old value, garbage value. Do you want that now? That is used by previous program. You don't want that. Your program wants a new value. Now what C, C++, there is no mechanism in C, C++ to clean this garbage value. You may get the value if you print it. But what I am doing, it will clean here actually. Even if you are not assigning the value also, I am saying only just double D. I am not assigning any value. But what it does in Java is, it will clean this. After allocating the room, this room used by previous program previously, it has kept the old value, garbage value, 99.9. It will clean this, make it empty, and then assigns the default value according to the double data type called 0.0. Is that clear? So if you want to declare a variables, we need to understand the data types. Clear? Data types, variables. We understand the syntax for declare variables using data types. And when you write a variable declaration, so this is a variable declaration statement. This is a variable declaration come initialization. This is a variable declaration. This is a variable declaration come initialization statements. Okay, guys. Now, data types are of two types. Types of data types. We'll go to new page. Types of data types. Data types, two categories. Data types, two categories. One is the primitive data types. Primitive data types. Second is user-defined data types. User-defined data types. Primitive, non-primitive, or you can say as user-defined. We generally call as in Java user-defined data types. So what are the primitive data types? Primitive data types are limited. Simple number. There are 8 primitive data types. There are 8 primitive data types. Simple. That's it. What are 8 primitives? One is the Boolean. Second is the char. Next, byte, short, int, long. These are for integer storage, and float, comma, double. That's it. These are all keywords only. Not Boolean, you have to write fully. Okay, maybe when you're typing, it is fine, but it is, bool is in C++. In Java, it is a Boolean, B-O-O-L-E-A-N. You have to write as Boolean. Boolean, char, byte, short, int, long, float, double. These are the 8 primitive data types. Simple. And sizes, we'll talk later. What are user defined? So primitives, you clear? Primitives clear. What are user defined? What are user defined data types? Yeah. Any class type. Any class or interface or annotation or enum types. Annotation or enum types. So currently, don't consider interface, annotation, enum, all that. Those we'll talk later. For easiness, so any class type is user defined. Means whatever a class you are defining is a new data type you are defining. You are writing a class means it is a new data type. You are writing a class means it is a new data type. So what are those? So how many user defined are there? Primitive 8 are there. User defined, how many are there? User defined, how many are there? Unlimited. We can't count it, right? Why unlimited? You can write n number of classes. You write 1,000 classes, lakhs, crores, n number. And unlimited class. There's no number. Any class you write, that is a user-defined data type. Any interface you write, that is user-defined data type. Any enum you write, any annotation you write, everything is user-defined data type. So some samples. Hello, I am writing. These are list of list examples. So here, hello is a class. Okay. Hi is a class. Okay. String. Okay. System. Okay. Customer, I am writing. Yes, my own class, customer. List, built in. Account, my class. Arrays, don't confuse on this. I think you will confuse on this. Queue, a linked list, built-in class. Like this, any class interface you write, those are all user-defined data types. No limit for that. N number. Some you write in your project. There are many built-in coming up from the corresponding technology. For example, in Corja, we have many. When you're learning JDBC, some built-in classes are there. When you're learning Servlet, when you're learning Hibernate, they provided many built-in classes. When you're learning Spring Framework, many built-in classes provided there. Like there's so many built-in classes. Everything is user-defined only. So data types, two types, right? Similarly, based on these two types of data types, variables also two types. Variables also two types. Types of variables. Variables also two types. Just for based on this. Now, one is the primitive variables. Primitive variables. Second category is reference variables. Primitive variables and two types of variables. Primitive variables and reference variables. Primitive variables and user-defined variables. So you can say now very easily, what are primitive variables? Variables declared with primitive data type are called as primitive variables. Can I say like that? For example, variables declared with primitive data type is called as primitive variable, right? And what about you? Take the example of this, for example. What examples you can give? Can I say Boolean B semicolon? Whether B is a primitive variable? B is a primitive variable. Int A. Can I say A is a primitive variable only? Hello H. Whether H is a primitive variable? Whether H is a primitive variable? Whether H is a primitive variable? No, no, that is not a primitive variable. That is opposite section, right? Reference variables. Variables declared with user-defined data type. User-defined data type. User-defined data type is called as reference variables. Shortly, I'm writing ref variables, reference variables. Hello H. What is the H here, guys? H is a reference variable. H is a reference variable. String str, semicolon. What is str? Is a reference variable. Str is a reference variable. So is that clear? Basics. Primitive data types of two categories. There are two types of data types: primitive data types and user-defined data types. Primitive data types, there are 8 primitive data types: boolean, char, byte, short, int, long, float, double. User-defined, any Java class you define, interface you define, enum you define, annotation you define, these are all user-defined data types only. Unlimited, there's no count, n number you can define. But primitives, you can't increase, you can't decrease. 8 only, those are fixed. 8 primitives, we can't increase, decrease. User-defined n number. Coming to variables, two types of variables: primitive variables, reference variables. Variables declared with the primitive data type are called as primitive variables. When you declare a variable with any boolean, char, anything, these are all primitive variables only. And reference variables, variables declared with any class type, user-defined type, are called as reference variables. Right? Variable definition, variable is a container of data or name of the memory block. Variable is name of memory block which holds the data. Is a container of data. Is containing data, right? Is a container of data. In the memory block representation, I given a 4 bytes of memory block allocated. Name of that is variable. The block name is variable, means it is A containing value 10, B containing value 20, C containing value 30, like that is a container of data. Clear? Fine. So now we'll start exploring each one. We'll take the primitive variables. And explore more. Then we'll take the reference variables and explore more. Now starts with primitive variables next. So primitive variable definition we understand. What are primitive variables? Primitive variables are the variables which are declared with primitive data type. Variables declared with primitive data type are called as primitive variables. One line we know. Next, my question is, how much memory will be allocated for primitive variables when I declare? Tell me, guys, how much memory will be allocated for primitive variable when I declare? How much memory will be allocated for primitive variable when I declare? Ah, very good. Harshini, Sandhya, Naveen. That is not fixed. That is not fixed. Depending on the data type. Depending on the data type. How it is depending on the data type? Have some examples. Number one, I'm saying int A equals to 10. So, and I'll take double 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 D equals to 9.9. Byte B equals to 9. Char CH equals to capital A in single quote. Boolean X equals to, I'm saying true. Okay? Anything. Either you can assign a value or no need to assign. There are two ways, right? You want an empty variable or with the default value, your wish. Otherwise, I won't take anything on this. Don't assign anything. Make it just declarations. So these are all A, D, B, CH, X are the primitive variables only. Clear, right? A, declare the primitive data type. D, these are all primitives. That is clear. So allocate the memory for this. How much memory will be allocated for A, guys? For A, how much? 4 bytes. And what is the default value of this? What's the default value? 0. Next, D. How many bytes will be allocated for D? 8 bytes. What's the default value? 0.0. Very good. Byte. How many bytes will go for byte? Byte, 1 byte. Block name is B. How many default byte is 0? Char, 2 bytes in Java. In C, C++, it is 1 byte only actually. In Java, 2 bytes it is. And block name is CH. And default is ASCII 32 it is. We'll talk about this later. Remember current class, it is not a 0, it is not a space. ASCII 32 it is. Okay? We will explore about this. Boolean, how much space has to be allocated? It allocates 1 bit. For Boolean, 1 bit. 1 bit. For Boolean, not 1 byte. 1 byte means 8 bits. It allocates 1 bit. Default value of Boolean is false. Means it makes 0 only internal. 0 is the false. 1 is the Boolean 0 means false. Boolean 1 means true. Right? So, what do you understand here? There are 8 primitive data types, guys. There are 8 primitive data types. What is the size of, with these 8 primitives, you can declare a primitive variables. So, what is the size of primitive variable if I answer? If I ask, how much memory will be allocated for primitive variable? How much memory will be allocated for primitive variable? Depending on the data type. Correct? Depending on the data type. Next question. What is the default value of primitive variable? What is the default value of primitive variable? What is the default value of primitive variable? Default value of primitive variable. I'll take Abdul answer 0. How can you say 0, Abdul? My primitive x. What is the variable x? X is a primitive or not? I think above also 2-3 guys told like that, Monica and others. X is a Boolean or not? Tell me. X is a Boolean or not? Tell me. X is a Boolean, right? Here my variable x I declared. Variable x is a Boolean or not? Yes. What's the default value? It is actually false. Better you write as a false here. Don't keep as 0. Default of Boolean is a false. Default of double is 0.0. Integer is 0. So is it same? No. How it is? Depending on the data type again. Size of the primitive variable is depending on the data type. Default value of the primitive variable is depending on the data type. We can't fix it. Integer means 4 bytes, 0. Double means 8 bytes, 0.0. Boolean, 1 bit, false. Character, 2 bytes, ASCII 32. Byte, 1 byte, maybe 0 default value. So, the size of primitive variables. How much memory will be allocated for primitive variables? That is depending on the data type you are declaring the primitive. What is the default value of the primitive variables? Default value of the primitive variables also depending on the data type. We can't fix it. Clear? Now we'll take a table for that. So what are the values we have? I'll take a table, data type. Okay. Size of that. Okay. And default value. This table you have to store in your brain also. Start with the Boolean only. Simple Boolean. What is the size, guys? 1 bit. Size is 1 bit. What is the default value of Boolean? You answer it now. You have to answer it. Default value of Boolean, please. False. Very good. Next. I am taking byte, guys. Next we'll take a char. Order will come like this, different. I'll take a char here. Char, how many bytes? 2 bytes. Default value ASCII 32. Remember this story, there is a story behind that. Next, byte, short, int. These are all similar categories, guys. These are all for storing integers only. If you have integer numbers, integer means numbers without decimal points. When integer numbers are there, you can go for a byte, you can go for a short, you can go for int, you can go for long. My question to you, why they given a 4 types for integer number storage? They can give one, right? Why they given a 4 for storing integer numbers? Why they given a 4 for integer numbers, guys? Byte takes 1 byte, short takes 2 bytes, int takes 4 bytes, long takes 8 bytes. Why 4 data types given? One is enough, right? Space management, very good, very good. See, if suppose they given only long, integer means only long given 8 bytes. Whether you want to store a small integer or a big integer, you will always allocate 8 bytes. If I am taking a small integer, why to allocate so many 64 bits of memory? Wastage, right? So you decide, depending on your program you are writing, what is input coming up? What is input coming up? What can be the size? Whether it is smaller value, go for small only. You choose 4 options. And defaults of all these guys, 0 only. All this, because integer, default 0 only. Integer, default is 0 only. Next, go for a 2. Floating point related, again a 2 given. If you want to store floating point, means with a decimal point you want to store. With the decimal point you want to store. 2 given, float and double. Why 2 again? Space. Float takes 4 bytes, double takes 8 bytes. When you have a small floating points, go for a float. And large floating point numbers, go for a double value. And because both are for floating point only, default is 0.0 and 0.0. Is that clear, guys? Sorry, float is 0.0f. Who is that? Who is that? Abhishek. Yes, you are right, Abhishek. Is it 0.0f actually? 0.0f. There is a reason. We'll see that later. Yes, Abhishek, you are right. 0.0f. So is that clear? Primitive variables are the variables declared with the primitive data type. Boolean sizes depending on the JVM. Lakshmi's question is, someone said that Boolean sizes depending on the JVM. Now, do you have variety of JVMs? You may have a JVMs on different operating systems, but all JVMs are standard. JVM are standard. JVMs are standard. All JVMs works similarly. There is no change on the JVM functionality, even when installed on the Windows, Linux, Mac, Solaris, wherever you install, in whatever operating system install, JVM functionality will not change at all. It should be fixed. If I am declaring a Boolean variable and Windows allocating 1 byte and in Linux allocating 2 bytes, means again story will change. Correct? Everywhere JVM functionality is standard, there is no change at all. If JVM is allocating 2 bytes for the character on the Windows, JVM allocates 2 bytes only for the character in any operating system. It won't change at all. Not only for char, any data type, the standard implementation of JVM. So it won't change, guys. It won't change. Lakshmi, it won't change. Fix it. Fix your mind. JVM functionality will not be changed depending on the operating system or the architecture of the processors. The standard across the platforms, right? Now, primitive variables. I hope, is that clear? Can you go to reference variables now? Can you go to reference variables? Any doubts on primitive, guys? Go to reference variables. Second category is reference variables. Yes. So what are reference variables? Variables declared with user defined data type called as reference variables. You can declare a variable with class type, or you declare a variable with interface type, declare a variable with enum type, annotation type, any types you declare, any user defined type you declare, that is called as reference variable. So take examples. Hello is my class, H semicolon. Hi is my another class. Variable name I'm taking as hi semicolon. String str built-in class. Okay. List I am using, this is actually a built-in. Just make it as my variable name I'm taking as a list. This is actually interface, just to say is an interface. Okay, guys. Then what else we have? Customer I'll take. This is my class again. So how many variables are declared? 5 variables are declared. What is H? Whether H is a reference variable or primitive variable. H is a reference variable or primitive variable, guys. Reference only. How can you say that? How can you say that? How can you say that? Because declared with class type. A variable declared with class type is called as reference only. Everything same. Hi is a reference variable declared with the class type. str is a reference variable declared with the string class type. List is the reference variable declared with the interface type. Cust is a reference variable only because it is also declared with the class type called customer. All the reference variables only. Reference variables memory allocation is so simple. When you declare a reference variable, with any class type, with any interface type, always 8 bytes of memory only allocated for the reference variable. And default value is null only. Default value is null only. 2 standard points. My question, what is the memory allocated for reference variable? 8 bytes. Primitive, you cannot answer like that, right? Primitive, you cannot answer like that. If I ask you how much memory will be allocated primitive variable, you have to say, I can't say that because it is depending on the primitive type. If you say integer, it is 4 bytes, double means 8 bytes, float means 4 bytes, long means 8 bytes. It will change depending on. But here, when I declare H with hello type, how many bytes? 8 bytes only. Hi, for H, how many bytes? 8 bytes only. For hi, 8 bytes only. str, 8 bytes only. List, 8 bytes only. Cust, 8 bytes only. You declare a variable with any type of a class or interface, whatever it is your class, somebody written, given free, you purchase the class, whatever, it is 8 bytes. And the default value also null only. So allocate memory now. Allocate memory now, guys. I'm allocating memory for H. How many bytes for H? 8 bytes. Default value, null. How many bytes for hi? This name is H. Next, how many bytes for hi? Block name is hi. 8 bytes only. Default is null only. Standard, right? str. Block name is str. How many bytes? 8 bytes. Default is null only. List and 8 bytes. Default is null only. Customer type 8 bytes. Default is null. Block name is cust. Naveen is asking, how can you say that class type or you should know that whether it is a class or interface. Because you are you are declaring a variable of customer class means, Naveen, you should know whether customer is a class or interface. You are writing a program. Okay. When you are writing a program, you are using a customer class or you are using a list interface. Means you should know about that functionality. Then only you can use it, right? Before you using, you studied it. List is an interface. It has some methods. So that you are using that in your program. Without knowing, we can't use it. You will study all that functionality. You will, whatever class, there are two ways, guys. Whether you will write a class or you will write interface. If you write a class or interface, you know about that. Second, you are using built-in classes provided freely for you in the Java. So you should know about a built-in classes. And don't go anything deeper about interface. We have a lot of time to study that. Remember, interface also another class, special class. Interface also a special class. More details about interface we will study later, Vishnupriya. Reference variables clear, guys? You declare a variable declared with user-defined data types. Variable declared with user-defined data types is called as reference variable. Any reference variable of any data type declared, always 8 bytes of memory will be allocated irrespective of the data type. And default value is the null for reference variable irrespective of data type. So primitive references, primitive variables, reference variables. Difference clear? Primitive references, difference clear, guys? Yes. Now, another big difference with the primitive reference, I'll show you here. Primitive versus reference, the biggest story. Say, guys, I'm declaring simple int a equals to 99 semicolon, guys. When this is one statement regarding primitive. References I'll take string 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 str equals to I am writing JLC. Okay, simple. 2 lines. You know clearly. A is a we'll start with int is a primitive variable. So the variable A I am declaring with a primitive data type int. So my A is a primitive variable. Next, here string is a class type and user defined data type. So I am declaring variable str with the class type. So my str is a reference variable. Correct? How much memory will be allocated for A? How much memory will be allocated for A, guys? 4 bytes. Okay. Simple. What is the name of this block? Variable name A. And this is a primitive memory block, right? In this, whatever, this is a value, right? This is a value. The value will be stored here only. It is storing the value here only. In the 4 bytes, whatever allocated, in that 4 bytes only, it is storing the value. Primitive variable is containing the value. Am I right? A is a primitive variable which containing the value. Clear? 99 value it is containing. Come to the references. STR. Memory block allocation, guys. How much memory will be allocated here? How much memory? 8 bytes. Okay, I'll ask you a twisty question. That's what I'm changing the data. I'm writing here Srinivas, SRINIVAS. Yes. 8 bytes only. Very good. Now, block name is the str. Str, that variable name is there. So block name is str. Fine. Consider that like whatever we had done in the primitive case, In that 4 bytes of block allocated, in that only we are keeping our data. Same, can I keep this data inside this block only? SRINIVAS. Is this okay? Can I keep that? Is it possible? So you have to ask me a question. Assume I am telling that it is storing the Srinivas in that box, allocated box. So you have to ask me the questions now. Sandhya asked me a question. It has more bytes. For storing Srinivas in the memory, how many bytes required, guys? You answer it first. For storing the Srinivas name, how many bytes required internally in the memory? That is my question. First, only answer that. How many characters are there in Srinivas, guys? At least how many characters? SRINIVAS. 8 characters are there. 8 characters. In Java, how many bytes will be allocated per character? Character size 2. One character needs 2 bytes. One character needs 2 bytes. In Java, fixed, we can't change. I have 8 characters, so I need 16 bytes of space. I need 16 bytes of space to store the Srinivas. But how much allocated for me? 8 bytes only allocated. How can I store that? My name is small. I think I am seeing some of your names as bigger names. For example, Devi Shri Sindalurina, Pushpa Madhuri, something is there. See, your name is bigger, right? You have maybe 20 characters in your big name. Then how to store? How to store that many number of characters in the 8 bytes allocated to me, guys? Question? So here what is happening is, this 8 bytes is not for storing your data. Reference variable 8 bytes allocated for you. This is not for data. You keep your data separately wherever you want to keep. Okay, I'll keep my data here. Whether you are storing Srinivas, you want 16 characters, you store. Or you are storing srinivasdande, whatever big name, whatever you want to store here, guys. You have a 2 characters, 3 characters, 20 characters, 2000 characters, 2 lakh characters. How many data you want, you keep separately in some place. Now, only address of this you keep here. Suppose address is 955. Consider address of this room number only will keep here. What the reference variable contains? Reference variable does not contain the data. Correct? Reference variable does not contain the data. Data will be stored separately. This actually we are calling as an object. We'll talk later in object oriented more clear. You are storing data in the object separately. You store the data in the object separately. That object address only you are storing in the reference variable. What reference variable contains, guys? What reference variable contains? Address of your data. Am I right? Address of what? Your data. So primitive case, in the primitive case, I am giving 4 bytes. You keep your data there only. The 4 bytes I am allocating for primitive, 4 bytes I am allocating for primitive variable. For example, if it is integer, if integer 4 bytes I am allocating, the 4 bytes allocated is to store the data only. So primitive variables stores the data. Primitive variables contains the data. Primitive variable memory block contains the data. References, I'm giving 8 bytes. That 8 bytes you cannot store data. It is not for storing data. You store data somewhere, wherever you want, you store somewhere. Address of your data, you keep in my reference variable. So the point to take here is primitive variables contains data, right? Yes or no? What about reference variables, guys? Reference variables, tell me. Contains address of data, right? Address of data. Yes, address of data. You are keeping data somewhere. Your data may be small or big. You wanted 2 bytes, 20 bytes, 2000 bytes, 2 lakh bytes. If space is there in your RAM, you keep store there. You bring the address only. Keep with me. Reference variable holds the address of data. In general, maybe in object-oriented we'll study, the portion where you store the data is called as an object. So in general, you can say reference variable contains address of object. Where you're storing data, you're storing data in the object. That object address will be stored in the reference variable. So I hope the difference between primitive variables and reference variables clear. 4 points. 4 points. Number 1, primitive variables. Primitive variables. Variables declared with primitive data type are called as primitive variables, whereas variables declared with user-defined types are called as reference variables. One difference. Second one, in the case of primitive variables, memory allocation is depending on the data type, whereas in the case of reference variables, always 8 bytes of memory will be allocated for reference variables. Third, primitive. In the case of primitive, the default values are depending on the primitive data type again. References, irrespective of the data type, always null will be the default value for the reference variables. Fourth, primitive variable contains the data, whereas reference variables does not contain the data. Reference variable contains the address of the data. Is that clear about primitives and references? Okay, guys, that's the primitive variables and data types. Still, we have to study much more about variables and data types. We'll see that in the next session. Okay, guys, that's about today's session. Remaining, we'll see the next session. Thank you. Have a nice day.